Conversations across time, 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 conversations across time.
Good evening and welcome once again to Conversations Across Time. Our regular viewers will note that we are in a different setting. I am sitting here with the show historian, Mark Hoffman.
Good to be here.
Oh, Mark, it's so good to be able to talk to you because we are now post-election and we are in an era that we sort of talked about last year for our regular viewers. You know that we did have a discussion. We did a series called Warm Water. And in that series, we talked about Russia's interests and what Russia was doing. The title of this show for our regular viewers who know us, and I am imagining that post-holiday season, you have had some heated discussions around family dinner. The one good thing about Conversations Across Time is because we have an opportunity to talk to you, our viewers, and we know that we are all part of a group of people that are concerned. As a former history teacher, Mark, this is something that is very discouraging to us to note how many others are not paying attention. So, of course, we know with our regular viewers, we're talking to people who understand, so we're going to try to unpack some things. The title of this show is Trump, the Manchurian Candidate, question mark. And Mark, let's just get right into it. Right now, we are witnessing a time period where the president-elect has some very specific interests, which seems that the public that elected him has no clue. And I'd like to ask you, what do you think in light of that and his admiration or mutual admiration that he and Vladimir Putin have for each other? Let's talk about that. What do you think Putin wants?
All right. The first thing is, going back to your introduction, Putin has pretty much accomplished what the initial phase of what he wanted, and that goes back in Russian history, warm water, which
Yes.
you introduced. And he's gotten that because he's gotten control of the Crimea and he's gotten control of the Ukraine. And Trump, who is, and just let me say this to start, who is gotten by the coyotes by Mr. Putin, goes along with whatever Mr. Putin wants. And in Trump's view, anybody that likes him, it's called reciprocal liking, he'll like. And Putin flattered him to death. And Putin probably won the election for him by hacking our election. And Putin now has a leg up on what he wants. He has the Ukraine. Mm-hmm. He has the Crimea. He's going to get control of Syria, and Trump has pledged to side with the Russians in defeating the rebels and ISIS in Syria so Assad can stay in power. Okay, so now the next move is, and what he needs to do is destroy NATO.
Yes.
During the campaign, candidate Trump at the time said that he was willing to break up NATO. He didn't like the way NATO was, and
They weren't paying enough. They weren't
contributing enough. But that to me, that was a smokescreen, exactly. And that plays right into Putin's playbook. Putin wants to establish a Russian state that existed right after World War II, after the Yalta Conference, where the Soviet Union dominated Eastern Europe, Eurasia, whatever you want to call it. The United States dominated the West, and it was the Cold War, and that's what he wants to go back to. And NATO, and let's talk about NATO very briefly. NATO was established to stop the Russian aggression throughout Europe.
And Mark, I'm going to ask if we're going to put up that chart that shows the 12 original members of NATO, which was created in 1949.
Correct, and they were the original members of NATO, and NATO means North Atlantic Treaty Organization. These were countries in Europe. There was, the United States and Canada, but mostly these were European countries that wanted to stop Russian aggression throughout Europe. And then later on, and we'll put up another chart, there were some additions to NATO because Russia was trying to make, or I should say the Soviet Union at the time, they weren't called Russia, was trying to make some incursions into Greece and Turkey. And that follows right in the Russian history to control the warm water ports, Turkey's the Dardanelles.
Yes.
And President Truman came up with the Truman Doctrine, which was to stop any type of communist aggression in that area. And that's when we added some more countries to NATO to stop the movement into Turkey and Greece and some of those other areas. And we'll put up that chart as well.
Now, Matt, can I just jump in for 1 second? What's particularly interesting, I know when you're talking about the formation of NATO and those countries being added, in 1955, something significant happened. In 1955, West Germany became a part of NATO.
Right.
And that led to the Warsaw Pact.
Exactly. So the Warsaw,
Yes.
the Warsaw Pact was the equivalent of NATO for the Soviet Union. That were the countries that were satellite of the Soviet Union, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Poland, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what happened was the Soviet Union broke up. And with the scattering of the Soviet Union, those countries became members of NATO. And we're going to put up a chart that shows all these new members of NATO. I think it was 1999 when they were admitted to NATO.
And then 2004,
some more. But these were all countries that once were under the control of the Soviet Union. And that's what Putin wants back.
Wants to get rid of NATO. And I know that this is the wonderful thing about our audience. We know that they know this. We're just trying to give you some tools when you speak to your unenlightened relatives and friends that hopefully perhaps you can refer them, because I like you, we like you, have been arguing over this past holiday season with relatives who just don't get it. So I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's fine.
But
the thing is, with Putin now, he is positioned to accomplish his goal. Once he destroys NATO and the countries of Europe are set up to fend for themselves, then he will have control of the former satellites of the Soviet Union, which were on the chart. They're the last members of NATO. And there won't be a strong European buffer to stop any type of Russian incursion. Now, Putin wants to control the flow of oil.
Yes.
And make Europe dependent on Russian oil. He's against fracking, so they can't get gas. He backs all the right-wing parties in England, in France. He gave money to the right-wing party, Le Pen's party in France, and he just wants to disrupt Europe. He funded the anti-Brexit movement, and it lost because by getting the United Kingdom out of the European Union, that weakens Europe.
It consolidates his power.
Exactly, and that's what he wants. And he envisions a world where Russia dominates what I will call, and this is a name I'm making up, it's kind of out of 1984, Eurasiana, which is he would control Central Europe and parts of Asia into Siberia.
And all of Eastern Europe.
All of Eastern Europe. And the United States, he would leave the United States alone. Our sphere of influence would be Latin America and that area of the world. And we would be, and he truly believes that these small countries, once NATO's broken up, will be at the bidding of Russia, at this time Russia and the United States. And Trump, as I said before, is his puppet.
Yes.
And he did everything in his power
to assure that Trump became the president of the United States.
Right, because Hillary would have been a strong supporter of NATO, would have been a strong supporter of the alliance, and would have stymied him. In fact, I just saw today that Trump is considering, when he takes office, of lifting the United States sanctions against Russia because of the Ukraine, and conceding the Ukraine to Russia. And that's, Putin has said, Donald, I love you even more.
That's right. And I'll tell you what is so interesting also that we can just touch upon. Look at how upset the right wing in this country, the Trump people, were with President Obama's befriending Cuba again. And I'm thinking about all of those people in South Florida that voted for Donald Trump because they thought that they were so anti-Castro that they were going to support Donald Trump. What they don't understand is that Trump has no interest in Cuba other than the fact that he's saying to Putin, yeah, the United States can have a relationship with Cuba because that falls in Putin's plan. Putin is already saying, okay, we don't need a naval base in Cuba.
And the thing is with Trump, and I can guarantee it, no matter what he says, he's going to keep the relationships with Cuba and expand on it because he probably wants to open up a couple of casinos there. So
yes.
So you can not to use a casino analogy. You can make book on that he's probably going to keep the casinos open, to keep Cuba open so he can get casinos. And we know that in Russia, because he hasn't made his income tax public, that he owes money to the Russian banks. So he's even more under the control of the oligarchs in Russia. So far, there's nothing that Putin would want. Like his Christmas, if we can use this season analogy, this Christmas wish list for Vladimir Putin, Trump got him every present that he could ask Santa Claus for. He's going to give him the Ukraine. Yes. He's going to destabilize NATO. He's going to, let Putin do what he wants, and it's his buddy because he likes him. He said, "I like Trump. Trump's a great businessman."
Well, I can tell you something. Yes, what that is particularly interesting to me is a little off-color reference, but I refer to Putin as Donald Trump's pimp.
Well, that's pretty good.
That's what he is, because Donald Trump has such an admiration for Putin, and I have, if you know anything about the street life, you know that is exactly the way women who are part of that trade feel about their pimp. And that's exactly what we're seeing with Putin and Trump. And I know it's off color, but again, as I said, our audience is particularly sophisticated. We're just having this so we can talk to each other and you can talk to your relatives, and be able to have at least know that we understand you and we understand each other. And the fact that this country would elect the likes of a Donald Trump, who is a puppet, a puppet of the Russian influence. And Putin, as former KGB, he is going right back to what existed at the time when we were kids, and I'm sure some of our audience will remember being in school and being told to hide under the desk for air raids.
Well, that's where he wants to go back to.
That's right. That's where we're going back to.
Russia dominated Central and Eastern Europe and part of Asia. The United States was their adversary, and Europe was in the middle. But what he would like now is to get rid of Europe and just have the two superpowers.
Exactly.
And the other thing about Putin is, and he might have a point here, he has disdain for the United States in terms of what we stand for. He thinks we're a bunch of phonies. He thinks we throw morality out to the rest of the world and we're no better than his country, and our leaders are no better than he is. Then we're no different.
I want to ask you something, Mark. I'm not so sure that Putin's allegation is not correct.
Well, you can make a lot of analogies between the two countries. Oligarchs rule the country. Mm-hmm. The person in charge favors the oligarchs, the richest 1%. He kisses their butt. Right. Trump ran on a platform to get the swamp cleared, drain the swamp. He created a swamp monster. I call the swamp monster Goldman Sachs-zilla.
Oh, yes. That's right.
Because you got Godzilla, Goldman Sachs, coming out of the swamp. The Secretary of the Treasury's from Goldman Sachs, and he was the one that criticized Hillary unmercifully
because of her relationship with
because she
Goldman
made
Sachs.
speeches and got paid for the speeches. He was up their butt, and he appointed them to key positions in the administration. So we know the policy is going to favor the big banks, the 10%. He's going to lower taxes for the richest people. And the sad thing is, the real sad thing is that the people that voted for him, that
they're so
supported him,
misguided.
they're the ones that are going to get
Yes.
shafted. I'll clean it up and say shafted.
And that is exactly right, because they went out and they voted for him under the premise that he was going to bring jobs back. How would you expect, I mean, in the Rust Belt particularly, especially in the steel industry, how would you expect that Trump's going to bring jobs back to the steel industry in the United States when in fact his buildings are constructed using Chinese steel? I mean, it's so appalling to me that folk could sleep on this. But I want us to get back to that world map, because when you're talking about Eastern Europe and the control that he wants, we talked about warm water, and it was something that was interesting when we were getting ready for this show, that we realized it's not just warm water, it's deep water. Because if you look at a map, you see that Russia is in need of ports that can accommodate. They don't have a great navy. They are in need of ports that can accommodate military ships. They are in need of aircraft, being able to accommodate aircraft carriers. And you look at the Black Sea, you understand why they necessarily have to have Crimea.
And also why he's so invested in Syria, because their
Yes.
naval base is at Tartus. So
Exactly.
Putin's heavily invested in Syria, and his buddy Assad, so he has to back him, and so he has to draw a line between fighting ISIS and the rebels,
Yes.
because they're on opposite sides. But what he has to, for Putin's goal to be effective, he has to, no matter who wins, he doesn't care if ISIS wins, or
Doesn't matter to him.
as long as Assad's in power,
Yes.
because Assad assures him of the naval base that
In
he
Tartus.
needs in Tartus.
Yes.
So
And deep water access
Exactly.
to warm water.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's all right out of the playbook, and it's where we would stand, where Hillary would have stood, and where Trump stands. And Trump, as I said before, is giving him so far everything he wants. There's no opposition, and there's really nothing even the citizens can do to stop Trump from kissing Putin's butt, because it's all foreign policy, and those kind of maneuvers are unilaterally done by the president. He doesn't need the approval of the Senate, so the Democrats can't filibuster. So and we're going to probably talk about this later, but some of his top advisors were paid by Putin and paid by the Russians, and are pro-Russian to the extreme. So it's really a very, very dicey situation, and most people, I don't think, are aware of how much influence Putin really has and what his goals are. I mean, he's going to achieve what Stalin couldn't achieve. He's going to achieve what the czars couldn't achieve, because
What Peter the Great couldn't achieve.
Right, exactly, because of Trump being his, as you said, pimp.
His pimp. And something else that happens is that this Russia's interest, the show that we did when we talk about warm water, and I do hope that for those who are watching us now that have not seen that you go to our YouTube, you go to our website, and you'll see that we were talking about warm water a year ago, before the election, before the serious campaigns had started. We were talking about the interests of Russia for warm water and what Putin wants. I don't think at the time that we were doing the show, we knew that we were saying things and trying to call people's attention to a problem, but I don't think even that we even realized just how much Trump was going to be able to give to Putin. It just seemed impossible.
You're right. We kind of knew what Putin wanted,
Right.
but we didn't think that the United States would be as complicit with Trump winning. Now, of course, at the time, nobody envisioned Trump winning. Anybody that tells me they thought Trump was going to win, other than Michael Moore, because I didn't think he would win either, and I had my own doubts. But the thing is, by, I don't use the word fixing the election, and having Trump become president, Putin assured himself that all his goals that he set out for himself would probably be fulfilled. And I don't know how it's going to be stopped unless Trump has a complete, change of heart. He's going to break up NATO. He has advisors that are going to be in his ear telling him that's all right, and the kind of world that Putin envisions is better for the United States as well. That's what they're going to tell him.
Yes.
And Trump, from what I understand, is the kind of person, last person that whispers in his ear is his lover. So,
yes.
So when we have the potential national security advisor, Michael Flynn, whispering in Trump's ear about how great Putin is and how wonderful the world would be to have Russia dominate Europe and have the United States dominate the Western Hemisphere, Trump's going to listen. And Michael Flynn, if anyone, is a paid Russian agent. He was paid by RT, which is Russian TV, would be our equivalent of, say, CNN. And he even went to a dinner celebrating, I guess I forget how many years, but the anniversary of Russian TV. And he was seated next to Putin. Now, you don't get a seat next to the leader of a big country like Russia unless you have some status, because that's an honor. I mean, part of the reason they have officers of protocols decide who sits where and how.
Yes, it's not an accident. You don't just go in and pick your seat at a dinner party.
Right. So he's definitely in Putin's hip pocket, and he's in Trump's ear. Trump's former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, was in the employ of the Ukrainian government.
The pro-Russian president of Ukraine.
Exactly.
Yes.
So there may be a few people that are going to counterbalance the pro-Russian dialogue, but as long as Putin keeps flattering Trump, as long
He's
as
so susceptible to flattery, by the way.
Yeah.
Trump is so susceptible to flattery. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
No, he is.
It's amazing to me that he's like a little girl. He's like a little girl. Oh, you look so cute today. I mean, and that sounds horrible, but that's really how I feel about Trump. He's very vengeful, and he's very vain. As long as you flatter him, you can be in his presence.
Right. So there's no Flynn and Manafort are going to say to Trump, this is in the best interest of the United States, and they're going to outline the geopolitical advantages to him.
Yes.
But he doesn't care about that. If Putin, for some reason, said you're a dumbass, he would change his policy.
Yes.
So the problem is who's around him and how easily he is swayed, how he likes people and how he doesn't. He doesn't like Merkel in Germany because she said bad things about him. It has nothing to do with how Germany's an ally of the United States, how important Germany is to our to defense and everything, but he doesn't like her because she didn't flatter him.
Yes.
And you can't conduct a government, you can't conduct foreign policy that way. And I don't know what's going to happen. I do know that Putin's going.
Yes, of course.
That we with Trump. So.
And I think we talk about Trump's ties and his business interests, and we know that thus far what we've seen with his appointments to the candidacy to the cabinet is that he is simply putting people in place that are going to further his business interests and their business interests. He doesn't care about this country. That's the thing that I didn't understand, how people in the Rust Belt did not see this. And even now, they don't see it. But we have to recognize that this is a businessman, and he's a businessman first. And his business is taking care of the Trump empire. And when we come back next week, what I want us to get into is the fact that he's floating the names, and I don't know, by the time that this show airs, perhaps they will have settled on who's going to be Secretary of State, but he's floated the name of 2 former executives of ExxonMobil. So if you don't think that has something to do with what's going to happen in the Middle East, you are, I don't know, I got a bridge I'd like to sell you. Because we are not, this country is not looking at the reality, and it's all there. It's, what was the old expression? If you want to hide something, put it where everyone can see it. And it's all here. And our audience knows that, which is why you tune into us each week, so that you can hear our discussions, because it just sort of goes along with what you already know. And all we try to do is make certain that we provide some programming that allows you to know you haven't lost your minds. We haven't lost our minds. But the rest of the country, I have no idea.
I'm quickly losing my mind with Trump.
Yes.
And, you know, just to the point you're making,
yes.
he just took a call last week from the president of Taiwan.
Oh, my gosh.
And
I know.
And we haven't had diplomatic relations with Taiwan since, I guess, 1979, 1980. So he's not, first of all, he's only president-elect, so he should.
He shouldn't have made the call. He shouldn't have taken the call.
He should have taken a call anyway. And I'm not even sure he knows where Taiwan is or what it's, and like somebody said, he probably thinks Taiwan is a side dish in a Chinese restaurant.
And that is entirely possible, because he's not understanding our relationships. For the past 40 years, this country has had a relationship with China. It might not be the best relationship, but the reality is we've had a relationship with China. And now, for him to acknowledge Taiwan, I guess the Taiwanese are just laughing their hips off, thinking about how unenlightened or how uninformed this man is. I don't believe he reads a newspaper. I don't believe he's ever read any.
The question I have, and I don't know the answer, is he just uninformed, or are these things done intentionally with people who favor the investments in Taiwan whispering in his ear? I think it's a little bit of combination. He doesn't know, and when they whisper in his ear, it's okay to do this. Don't worry about it, man. You know, he does it. And he doesn't think in any of the long-range consequences, and it really is frightening.
Yeah,
what he doesn't know.
It's a new world order, and when we come back next week, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the idea that at the time when I was talking about hiding under the desk for the air raid drills, to be considered aligned with Russia and communist interests was grounds for you not being able to teach in the public school system. There were so many things that could happen to you. So we will talk about how much influence is now going to be in this country coming from Russia, and how the very same people who would have accused people of being commies voted for a president who's now in bed with the leader of, well, he's KGB, so he's the leader of what was our arch enemy. So this has been Conversations Across Time. I hope that you've enjoyed it, and I do know that's the one good thing about speaking to you, is that you know everything that we're talking about, and you just need to know other people are paying attention. So with that, Mark, I thank you so much.
Great to be here.
We're gonna come back and tie this up and talk about the Middle East and oil. Thank you and good night.
Conversations across time. 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 Conversations across